Okay ladies and gents, welcome back to a brand new video. Today in this video I'm going to be reacting to my final year architectural thesis for my BA Honours Architecture degree, which received nominations for the RIBA Bronze Medal and the AJ Student Prize Award. So sit back, relax and enjoy. Yes, so today in this video I'm going to be reacting once again to my work. You've seen obviously me react to my first year work, my second year work, and today I'm going to be reacting to my third year and final year thesis. So when I submitted my thesis, I put together a video presentation, which is a 10-minute video talking through the process and all the drawings of my work and my portfolio. And today I'm going to be reacting to that video because I haven't watched it for a while. It's one of them things that when I finished university, I didn't want to look back at my work. I kind of wanted to put it behind me, but right here, right now, I'm going to react to it. I'm going to watch it for the first time in a while. So the thesis received nominations for the RIBA Bronze Medal, and essentially the RIBA Bronze Medal is a president medal. I think 2 students from every university accredited by the RIBA get nominations for these awards. So there's the bronze medal, silver medal, gold medal, and then I think there's a dissertation medal as well. And I think there's all kinds of awards. So essentially the bronze medal can only be submitted to a part 1 or an undergraduate student. So essentially if you're doing your BA Honours Architecture degree, so your part 1, you can qualify for the bronze medal. If you're doing your part 2, i.e. your masters, you can qualify for the silver medal. So essentially my work got submitted for the bronze medal, and I also got submitted to the AJ Student Prize Award, which is the Architects Journal Student Prize Award, which I think 50 of the universities across the country can submit their kind of students to that work.
And now a word from our sponsors.
So just before we react to my work, this video is sponsored by Ngozi. Ngozi is an online architectural rendering and 3D modeling course. The creator, Castor Small, is a graduate from architecture school, and he felt his university was doing a poor job in teaching 3D modeling and architecture visualizations. After graduating, he spent his time perfecting skills in architecture visualizations and has created an online course to teach you guys everything you need to know about rendering. The course will give you the tools to efficiently produce renders at a low cost. Use the link down below in the description to sign up and use the code Thomas10 to get yourself 10% off on the course. So back to the video. So my final year thesis was called The Sequel, but my final year work in total, the entire third year, was broken down into 2 portfolios. Portfolio 1 being design exploration, and I named my project The Sequence, and portfolio 2 was design resolution, and I named my project The Sequel. So like I mentioned, it is a 10-minute video, and we put together this video as part of our portfolio submission. And when it came to like panel moderations and final reviews, I presented this video for kind of like the final presentation essentially, because everything was digital with obviously being in lockdown, the pandemic and everything. So we had the opportunity to put together a video, and essentially this helped me because my work was essentially showing a film. So yeah, let's do it. Hello, my name is Thomas Rowntree, and this is my final present. Instantly, like, every time I watch this video, I speak so quickly at the start. Hello, my name is Thomas. I need to learn to slow down, and I think this kind of sets the tone. I come in way too quickly, and it kind of indicates that this is going to be a pretty quick video, and I'm going to be talking through pretty quickly. But yeah, I came in straight off the bat. Yeah, anyway. Presentation, my portfolio submission. Today I'm going to be presenting The Sequel. So I began the video with this kind of idea and to kind of tell the story of the project instantly. So I came into this video showing that it's a film. I've got the kind of vintage overlay and that kind of style that kind of sets the scene for the graphic communication of this project, which I think was really important for me. The whole entire story, and you'll see that everything that I do is based off film theory, my research in film. So I think for me to start the video with this kind of film overlay indicates that this is going into a film, and that is continuing the graphic communication of my portfolio. So as you can see here, it's a 2.0, which means The Sequel, which is the second portfolio, but essentially this is my final year thesis. So before we begin to present The Sequel, it's really important to take a recap and look at The Sequence, which is the movie that comes before. So The Sequence begins in exploring the movement on my site. Following research into the process of Bernard Tschumi and his methods in breaking down action into the event, plan and movement in the plan, I began to form my own rules in understanding movement. The quote from the Manhattan transcript, "The question becomes whether one can organise architectural drawings as a movement sequence," became key to my exploration. Quite luckily, during my time obviously filming videos and when I was putting together that portfolio one, which I just showed on the screen there, luckily I filmed my pin-up and I filmed bits of my work. So it actually turned out quite well because I could use that footage and put it in this final presentation, which kind of helped tell the story, and it helped kind of show the first portfolio, which really leads into the second portfolio, because although they're two separate portfolios, it tells one entire story. So portfolio one is essentially exploring the site, and then we use that information and resolve that information, which created portfolio two. So I think the fact that I actually filmed and did YouTube videos and that kind of thing really helped me to put together this video. I decided to break down movement into time, direction and speed, using film as a medium of study and framing as an anchor for my project. Using film theorists such as Deleuze and Sergei Eisenstein as theoretical inspiration, I used my movement exploration to form fields of information, which I applied film editing techniques to, which leads me to the sequel. So the sequel is a thesis that explores how we can use film framing and sequence of spaces to speed up or slow down the rate at which ex-convicts can reform. It is a monument that tells the story and experience of the convicts within their first 12 months of rehabilitation. As I began to do my research into ex-convicts, I understood that 39% of ex-convicts re-offend within the first 12 months of their rehabilitation. So I decided to set up a 12-month timeline which would describe the ex-convict's journey back into society, with each month representing a space of stories. So essentially, like I mentioned, portfolio one was looking at the site and exploring the site and breaking down the information on the site. And we used that information to create fields of information which helped us form a building for portfolio two, the sequel. But we had to use that information that we got from the site to be able to respond to something within society and help kind of someone in society, or tell the story of someone in society and create a construct. So I essentially decided to do research into ex-convicts and understand their journey, and I wanted to tie in my research in film theory and understanding time and sequences and framing and timelines. And then when I looked at ex-convicts, when I understood that they had this 12-month journey, I thought if I use the 12 months as kind of like this timeline, I can bring the two together and I could create kind of like this metaphorical timeline which would represent the ex-convicts' journey in their journey of rehabilitation. So before we begin to create a timeline, it was really important to get the correct backlighting. So I began with looking into Dilys Scofidio and understanding the process behind his work. And you can see here that I used the terminology backlighting instead of research, and that was something I consciously did at the start of the portfolio. So I exchanged out a lot of the terminologies used in architecture and I swapped it in with kind of architectural film theory terms to really tie in the idea that this is a film. We're talking about film theory here, and the kind of graphic communication, the story of everything that I did tied into this film idea. So for example, the contents page in my portfolio, instead of calling it a contents page, I called it the startup menu. So as you can imagine, a film, when you're obviously turning on a film and you're pressing play, there's a startup menu. And so for here, I use backlighting instead of research. And then I use kind of jump cut edits and those kinds of things to indicate models and drawings. So there's kind of a lot of things going into this, and you can see here by the screen itself, I've got the framing, just to indicate that this is being captured in a frame, which once again pushes the idea of this film. The slow house is a weekend house that follows a curve anchored by a hinge that forms a sequence of spaces. The hinge allows for a melodic sequence of spaces to be created, which also forms a rhythm of spaces. Understanding how the slow house uses an anchor to form these spaces allows me to form my own anchor to create a sequence of spaces that would alter speed and direction. So that precedent was really, really important to really kind of drive home the idea of my work, and using this timeline that would represent these ideas and this kind of journey of the ex-convicts. I needed to find a precedent that would really kind of help me back up that idea of using an anchor to create these spaces. Otherwise, I essentially had no reasoning or no rule as to like the construction of my building. So the slow house is a really good example of how they used the hinge, so from a fixed point, and how they had these spaces that would follow the hinge. So essentially my idea was that I'd have a timeline, a set timeline of 12 months, and the spaces would follow that timeline. So you kind of use these precedent studies quite cleverly. Using the field formed within the sequence, I created the journey that would then become the timeline. Though the timeline would be set, the spaces that follow the timeline would change depending on the stage that they are at along the 12 months. The spaces could change in width, height, and angles could alter the speed that they move through the spaces. Divergence could also provide a choice to what route they want to take. Using a 90-degree hinge, There could be vertical as well as horizontal timelines that would force people above or underground. And this essentially just pushes my research into Dillisker video even further, and just understanding how I could have vertical timelines as well as horizontal timelines, and kind of continue that research of this hinge. Began to create models and do initial sketches to try and understand the formation of the timeline and how we can use geometry to understand how level changes could work, how these widenings and narrowings of spaces would actually change the atmosphere. And though these kind of sketch models look really simple and quite basic, and these were quite quick iterations, these were really important to help me understand the geometry of the building, the story of the building, the atmosphere of the building, and these really helped me kind of explain the development of my work and the process of my work. So though these models are very quick and kind of fast, they're really important to the development of my project. I look back and I think I probably could have done a lot more of these. I could have been a lot more kind of detailed, and I could have done a lot more iterations with these. And this leads me to Labousse Woods, and I read the book War and Architecture, which explores the deconstruction of buildings in Bosnia during the war and believes that their form must be respected as integrity. Labousse Woods explores natural forms of healing in architecture, and it explores the scar as a demolition due to the war as something that cannot be erased. Instead, Woods provides a new fabric that fuses the remaining post-war buildings and acts as a mark of pride. Though the new fabric would fuse onto the existing buildings, there is a clear contrast between the two materials in geometry and materiality. Though there is a visual contrast, there will be an internal fusion between the two fabrics in maintaining the story of the war. Therefore, my thesis could act as a monument that takes pride in the experience of the ex-convict's path back into society, but could also run through existing buildings, so there is moments of education and interaction between the existing society. I then produced a series of drawings and models once again in response to this. And this is when I began to reintroduce my movement exploration from the site. So from this point, I had an opportunity to really tie in my previous work from Portfolio 1, all my research from the site, and really bring it into my Portfolio 2 and kind of nail it and really tie in the two projects, which is one of the really important things in the kind of marking criteria of this project. So essentially I used all of my research and all of the kind of frames that I created from Portfolio 1, and I introduced it into Portfolio 2 to create the formation and the facade of my building that would create lighting slits and ventilation strategies and lighting strategies and access and all those things. So tying the two projects together was absolutely vital to me, and it really kind of nailed home the story of my project, and I think this is what really kind of helped me to be able to be successful with this project and tying the two projects together. So using the frames captured and analysed during my exploration, I began to create a framework that would form the external skin of the building. Using Daniel Lipskin and the Jewish Museum as a key precedent. And this is one thing that I really didn't like about this video. There were some bits that I forgot to say when I kind of first presented it. So as you can see here, there's this little bit where I kind of come in with a voiceover, but you can hear the difference between the audios, which really irritates me, especially as someone that makes videos and that I'm kind of particular with my videos. That really irritates me to hear the difference between the audios, and it just sounds dreadful. So I definitely probably just should have spent a little bit more time on that. But yeah, as you can imagine, going into final year, finishing final year, I just wanted to get it done. So I wasn't really thinking about those smaller details. I began to understand how I could use voids that slice through the building to create contrast between light and dark spaces. He also uses a crisscrossing window method to create internal shadows. That also sounds so boring here. There's crisscross between light and dark spaces. I could have sounded a little bit more enthusiastic, but that add to the atmosphere. I also read an article about Louis Kahn called Light Matters to understand how I could create an internal atmosphere that would reflect the confusing journey of the convict. Using concrete as a canvas, I could create contrast between light and dark by introducing a series of slits. And instantly, that research into Louis Kahn backed up my idea of why I was using concrete, because essentially I was just using it as this kind of visual tool to be able to create these really dark and contrasting shadows to add to this internal and to emphasize this internal journey of the ex-convicts in their journey of reform. So that kind of research there backed up my ideas of concrete. So once again, critically analysing precedent studies was really important to this project. And essentially this is just a research project. I was just researching and just responding to that research in my kind of own way, in my story of my project. I made a framing model that explores this, and this leads me to my final design. prepare yourself for a lot of information here. This can be, this might be a little bit overwhelming. So the final design is constructed using this timeline and having these frames that follow the timeline to create 20 panels and modules that represent each frame along the timeline. Between the panels there are open slits that allow for natural ventilation and lighting strategies and also add to the internal experience. Each module will be made of bespoke in situ concrete, and 4 components, the front wall, the back wall, the roof and the internal layout, will make up each module. So the floor plan, the story of the convict. So the floor plan describes the 12-month experience back in society, and between months 0 and 1, the timeline begins at the west side of the building. The entrance has been designed to the width and height of a prison cell to indicate that this is the moment they are leaving prison and entering their rehabilitation journey. That was also a really vital thing that I decided to do to really tie in the idea that this is an ex-convict's journey. I designed the entrance of the building as the exact dimensions of a prison cell to indicate that this is the moment that they're coming out of society. And as you go through the building expands and gets wider and gets brighter, which indicates that as they go through their 12 months of rehabilitation, their opportunities get greater, they get into more freedom, and they have this opportunity to be able to reintegrate back into society with these greater slits and everything. And that is essentially the entire story of the project. Between months 2 and 5, a series of spaces describe their journey back into society. Ramps and stairs aim to change speed and direction, and diversions provide a choice. Level changes take people above and below ground along a vertical timeline. A series of changes through these spaces emphasize the confusion and emotional journey they begin in their reform. There are views into the existing building to provide moments of integration and education of the current society. Throughout these spaces, the slits in between the modules create harsh shadows and contrast between light and dark. So all of these spaces are quite meandering, they're diverting, they're going above, they're going below ground, they're kind of pushing you into different spaces, they're very dark, they're very cramped. And that is essentially kind of like this metaphorical idea of these ex-convicts going through this emotional journey. And it's essentially telling that story of how the ex-convicts, when they leave prison, they're quite confused and they find it quite difficult, and there's all these different journeys and they're making these decisions. The concrete essentially acts as a canvas for those shadows that add to the internal experience. As my building moves through the existing building, the internal detail shows that my building is supporting the structure of the existing building and has an internal fusion. Though the concrete material of my proposal visually opposes the brickwork of the existing, it was important for there to be this internal connection. So this was really important, following that research into Labousse Woods and understanding how, basically representing that the ex-convict's journey is very different to the current society, yet there is this internal fusion between the two because we are people, we are community. So essentially the concrete material is a visual contrast between the brickwork of the existing building, which indicates that the journeys are different, but there's an internal fusion which indicates it's obviously we're part of the community, we're people, etc. So the actual detail itself, the building that I constructed, the ex-convict's journey, actually supports the existing building, which was essentially just describing this internal fusion between the two. At 6 months, the midpoint of the journey provides a room full of mirrors to reflect on themselves and their journey of rehabilitation so far. There's a central rotating mirror that continues my Dillis-Cofidio research in creating virtual space and distortion. Between the months 7 and 9, after they've reflected on their journey so far, they are now deep enough to begin to make their own choices. The following spaces provide a series of openings to give them the choice of which space they want to move in, and provides further integration with the surrounding society. Choices: stay or leave or integrate. So at the midpoint there's these open spaces, which basically says that these ex-convicts can now go back into society. They can either go back and maybe re-offend or commit a crime or something, or they can continue their journey, but essentially it indicates that they have these opportunities, they have the choice of whether they want to stay or continue their journey of rehabilitation. These openings emphasise the choice that the ex-convicts have to either continue their journey of rehabilitation or go and re-offend and go back to prison. The open spaces are also much brighter to create a more comfortable environment, and you can either pass into the more public realm or private gardens at the back of the building. Between months 10 and 11, once they've decided to continue their journey, they move through a second existing building that contains a different type of working environment. Views into these spaces provide moments of education about the existing society before they finish their journey. As they move through this existing building, There is a drastic level change to provide greater views into the surrounding environment and adding a feeling of being on top. The slits between these modules also widen to provide greater views into the surrounding society. And at the 12 months to finish their journey, the building ramps down to the exit to force people to move faster through these final spaces to describe the momentum they build in their final month of rehabilitation. These final spaces are the widest throughout the journey. Once we now know the story of the building, it was really important for my landscape plan and the landscape of the building to extend the story of the sequel into the surrounding environment. So to tell the internal story of the building, I extended some of the geometry into the surrounding landscape and created patches of hard and soft landscaping. This landscape was really important in encouraging integration with those spaces and emphasises the ex-convict's journey impact on the society. The benches and furniture within the landscape and the internal spaces have been designed in response to the movement frame corresponding to that piece of furniture, creating bespoke furniture that responds to the movement frames. And this kind of just emphasizes the fact that every single decision that I made, even down to the furniture, was made obviously from those movement frames, and that it indicates at what point they are in their journey. Every single decision that I made responded to my film theory research, to my site research, to my site exploration. Every bit of research that I did, all my work responds to that. And then finally here, it's just kind of like this post-production book, which kind of shows these visualizations and the atmosphere of these spaces, kind of a little bit more kind of hyper-realistic, but they're not too hyper-realistic, they're quite basic, but these kind of indicate the story and the internal journey of the project. The post-production book holds the visuals that describe the atmosphere at each stage of the timeline. The visuals show the narrow, dark, meandering journey within the first half of the building, diversions that take people above and below ground with narrow streets of light. Even though these aren't like the most detailed visuals, I actually really like them. They're quite obviously very simple and they just show the kind of story of the project. I'm moving into more open spaces with greater sunlight and access to the surrounding environment. And that is the sequel. Thank you for watching. That is it. That is my final year thesis. Like I mentioned, that received nominations for the RIBA Bronze Medal and the AJ Student Prize Award. I didn't win any of the awards, but it was really obviously really nice to be able to get nominated for that, and it was like an amazing achievement for me to kind of finish my part one. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed that. I kind of tried to go through and describe it a little bit better because I think it's quite a complicated project. And I thought obviously if you guys can understand it a little bit better, it might inspire you or kind of help you in your projects at university itself or in competitions, etc. And yeah, that is my final year work. I guess that is probably the end of all my reaction series of my kind of work. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you found this kind of work interesting. I hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you so much for watching. If you liked the video, if you enjoyed the video, please hit that thumbs up button. That'd be much appreciated. And if you haven't yet subscribed, that'd be absolutely fantastic. Thank you so much for watching, people, and I'll see you next time.